time once again for Community Forum, and we're very lucky to have with us live in the studios this morning Marcus Green and Devin Chicras. Marcus Green is founder and executive director, and Devin Chicras is vice president, and they're both with the South Seattle Emerald. Marcus and Devin, thank you very much for coming and spending time with us this morning.
Yeah, thank you for having us today, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
So start out and tell us about the South Seattle Emerald, and what was your motivation in founding that, Marcus?
Well, the South Seattle Emerald, we say that we act as the countervailing force against what passes for news coverage coming out of the South End area of Seattle. My motivation was, I lived in the South End area for a majority of my life, and the stories that you hear about us, for the most part, tend to be around violence, urban rot, and basketball. And, I love basketball like anybody else, but you would think in Seattle's most eclectic and diverse area that you would have more stories than just, somebody's cell phone was robbed. I think I just saw that 2 weeks ago on a blog of, I think I was reading Como or Cairo's news. We have these tremendous people, tremendous organizations in the area that rarely get any type of coverage other than, if something, truly bad or terrible happens. And I felt that there needed to be a more comprehensive view of our area.
And Devin, how did you get involved with the
Great
project?
question. Well, by trade, I am Seattle's friendliest damn web designer. But what I've tried to do typically is find ways to use kind of my skill set with design, web design, graphic design, branding to improve the community that I live in. I live in the South End as well. And that's kind of been a journey that I've been on. And along the way, I ran into Marcus and through that and decided to try and bring those skills to the Emerald and see if I couldn't make stuff happen that way. From trying to rebrand a neighborhood, kind of developed into working with the Emerald and literally trying to use design to package and deliver stories that both connect to readers and leave memorable impressions. And so, we've been doing a lot of things around branding and stuff, and that just led to me joining the board and becoming vice president and doing all sorts of odd jobs and roles, and from editing and writing stories and all kinds of things. And so
she's our Jane of all trades, we call her. So
absolutely. I mean, we're such a scrappy little startup and we don't have much in the way of resources, but I feel like we have such an incredible team and we are all trying to pull as much weight as possible. And I think that sets us apart is that most of us are all volunteers and kind of doing it because we really believe in it. And I think that really shows in the work that comes out and in the Emerald. And we've definitely heard that from folks too. So yes, that's encouraging.
Definitely.
So how did you go about gathering writers, and what's your, how do you select stories that you're going to cover?
That's a good question, Mike. With the writers, there's a lot of coercion with offering them beer. I couldn't offer too much of anything else. No, honestly, it's just telling them our mission and what we wanted, and you see that there's such a thirst for news about this area, and I'll say accurate news about this area. And so I'll have to say that it's been fairly easy to acquire writers who, especially those who live in the South End and want to see it portrayed in a way that they feel is more in line with what they see in their as they live their lives in the day to day. In terms of stories, it seems like we have our pick of the litter. We're constantly getting solicited, from people, whether it's organizations in the area, our artists in the area, are people who just want, better coverage, or what they would see as better or more comprehensive coverage around issues that affect our area. If that's, in terms of, affordable housing, in terms of the youth prison that King County has proposed to build. They kind of, I'm beginning to see that they sort of look at us as a, not at all trying to say that we are the equivalent, but look at us as more of a sort of a democracy now for the Seattle area, and I'm very much I'm appreciative of that, and hope we can live up to that. So,
do you have you're online at southseattleemerald.com?
We are, and thank you for the shameless plug, Mike. No, we are primarily online now on the southseattleemerald.com, as you mentioned. We are also working on a print publication as well that will be distributed monthly, similar to what the Seattle Weekly does. It'll be a free publication, and we're also working on a radio show as we speak. That will be a 1 hour show, akin to Meet the Press or something like that, but on the radio. So.
And how do you get funding for your different projects?
Really, we have our 10 cup out that we ask for people. Ask money for people. We're also I'm fortunate enough to have a wonderful board who contributes financially to us, and a lot of it honestly comes from my savings. I believe in what we're doing, and I believe that it'll continue to grow, and I believe that people will financially support what we're doing. And when we say we're reader supported, that is not a euphemism. We really are reader supported from the people who live and appreciate what we're doing here in the South End area. So it really is something that comes from the people.
It's been such an incredible experience to talk to people about the Emerald and just see their eyes light up, and people, whether they're just hearing about it for the first time or folks that have heard about it and read it and are already excited about it. I mean, it's maybe appropriate that it's Valentine's Day today because, the Emerald itself is like one giant extended love note to all of, our neighbors, our coworkers, our family, the friends we have yet to meet, in South Seattle. And, so many outlets rake in their clicks with all of that clickbait and those sensational stories. And if it bleeds, it leads, like Marcus was talking about, that whole mentality. And we try to focus on the stories that aren't getting told, the stories that don't fit the traditional stereotypes, and the stories that talk about people, places, ideas that we love in South Seattle, like whether that's a local business that's flourished despite incredible odds, like Joy Iverson's Tin Umbrella Coffee in Hillman City, or an unexpectedly successful family-friendly event in an area plagued by negative popular perception, like Rainier Beach's Boo at the Beach, or where I live, West Hills Skyway Outdoor Cinema. We had a rash of crime and people not wanting to go on the streets, and the media really perpetuated that fear tenfold. We have neighbors that don't want to open up their doors to each other, and yet we got hundreds upon hundreds of people out to this little parking lot to watch movies outside with their kids. It was incredible. So,
right.
Changing that perception allows, using the Emerald helps things like that be successful. So.
Right, and then just to piggyback on what Devin was saying, I mean, we really see ourselves as, fighting against, are providing a counter narrative to, what has sort of taken hold in terms of the mindset of this area. I remember prior to starting the Emerald, I was talking to a young man named Jamal at a bus stop, and I asked him what he thought about the South End area, and he said, it's just all bad, it's terrible. And he said, we're all bad and we're terrible. And I said, well, why do you think that? And he said, it's because they tell us that we're terrible. They say that we're terrible. And, and I think that was just extremely illustrative to me of the fact that it's sort of become, this narrative has sort of become ingrained, that we're painted with this broad brush, all of us, no matter from Mount Baker, where we, sort of begin our coverage, all the way to Skyway, where we end our coverage. And I think it's that necessity. It feels good to provide a sense of pride for people about where they live, and so that they can say that, they're just as good as, the South End is just as good as anywhere in Seattle. I mean, and I'm biased, so I'll say it's better than anywhere in Seattle, but it's good to be able to provide that for people. People need stories that truly reflect their lives in their area, and it's important that those stories be accurate, and that's what we try to do.
I read in a short piece, an interview the Seattle Weekly did with you that you said the crime stats for South Seattle are actually lower than the North End.
Yeah, depending on depending on how you compare things, but we actually have less crime in terms of, I want to say, not robberies, but I know I want to say domestic and drug crime. And so it's interesting that, with Mercer Island and in certain other areas of Seattle, having, huger incidences of drug crime and things like that, they never, for whatever reason, get brandished as these horrible areas that you would never want to live. But yet that continues to plague the South Seattle area for some reason. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I think that it becomes intentional after a while. It seems to be too stubborn of a pattern for it not to be. So.
Absolutely. I mean, we have concrete examples, and I think the more that we've been digging into the Emerald and spending time thinking about this bias and whatnot, it really makes you realize when those instances are happening and being able to point them out. I know that, for instance, I'm very involved in my community down in, near Skyway, West Hill area, unincorporated, but just as much Seattle region as anything. Like I said, we went through a rash of crime, just like the entire South End did, just like the entire city was at the time. And after holding a community meeting, following a particularly nasty incident, there were a few folks in the community that were upset about it, but we had cameras from all the major news stations there and following the whole thing, hoping to get some more information on this, a story about this crime and whatnot. Yet there were, resident after resident came up and told these positive stories about great things happening in the neighborhood, about all these positive things, and yet the cameras caught the whole thing, and we all went home, turned on the news, and it turns out they edited out all of the positive to get maybe the one or two people that actually had some negative stuff to say. And so it hurts. It does hurt because, that's the place that you live and the full story, the whole story. But that whole story doesn't all neatly fit into this paradigm that some of the major news outlets have kind of carved out for the South End. It's so convenient to kind of pick and choose the things that already fit the stereotype that they already have.
Right, and another example of that is that after the Ferguson protest down in Rainier Beach, I believe it was a dozen students. They acted out a bit, and they went to the adjacent this grocery store that's adjacent to the school, and sort of rifled through and stole a couple things. And Como News, they left skid marks outside their headquarters and trying to get down there to cover this, for a dozen students out of the 450 I want to say who attend Rainier Beach High School. And so the students themselves, they decided to organize a day of justice, they called it, to have a positive reaction to not just Ferguson, but the Black Lives Matter campaign that's been going on across the nation. And they asked Como to come, Cairo, King 5, to cover to follow up with the story that they did on the Rainier Beach students who had ransacked the grocery store, to showcase that, not all of the students are like that the majority, as a matter of fact, are responding in a very positive way. And they said, to quote them, they heard crickets, and, nobody wanted to come cover anything that they were doing that was positive because, again, it didn't fit into this neat little story that, Rainier Beach students are essentially, walking menaces to the South Seattle area, which is, then that's their words. So, we need to highlight those things. We need to highlight when, people are doing wonderful things in our area. And, we continue to do that. And we just recently ran a story about them doing that about them doing the assembly and the Day of Justice that thankfully has gotten a lot of traction and, been very positive. So.
Also contrast your coverage of the youth jail that appears to be locked in now.
Yeah, it seems like I don't know. It seems like we saw the Emerald and other major media outlets seem to be living in two different worlds with that. I just so happened to I went to the youth jail protests and the King County Council meeting last Monday, where over, I want to say, wound up being over 200 people, I believe, that came down during this midday meeting that the King County Council had called to approve the contract, with the designer of the new youth jail that'll be built on 12th and Alder, replacing the current facility. And what I saw there were these people engaged in, very civil, this sort of outpouring of civil disobedience against this jail. And unfortunately, in the other media outlets, they continue to be portrayed as, people who don't know what they want, as these unruly demonstrators who use curse words every 3 words, as opposed to citizens who are actually concerned about, what is going on in their community, and citizens concerned about the disproportionality of youth of color being locked up. The stat that they cite often is that, black youth make up only 8% of the population in the King County area, and yet they account for 42% of the juveniles who are incarcerated. And one of the glaring things that the media wanted to grab onto from that day was there was an incident that involved a gentleman, James Williams, being threatened with arrest at the council meeting because his public testimony wound up going 20 seconds over the 2-minute allotted time period that people are given to speak. And so I believe it was Councilmember McDermott who called for police to come in, and just 25 of SPD and King County's finest, flooded into the council chambers, and 72-year-old men were thrown out the way. Women were thrown on the floor. They just had this blatant disregard for anybody who was in the way and attempting to get to Williams. And you had all these citizens who were there concerned about Williams's well-being, who formed this halo around him, and just were non-violently resisting. The police forcefully removing him from the chamber, and seeing that it just showed me at least that these people were doing all that they could in terms of being civically engaged against what they felt was, what they continue to feel is just this ignorance from the county, and this and the county not wanting to hear anything that they're saying, and yet to see how it was portrayed and distorted by major media outlets, including Como News, who said that the police showed extreme restraint when it was the exact opposite. It was the people showing this extreme restraint. Anytime that you need 25 officers to come and quote unquote restrain a man who isn't resisting you, that sort of should raise red flags, I think, to any citizens, and especially ones in this city who we pretend that we're such a very liberal and progressive city, for them to have this sort of extreme response to what was going on. That I think that should have been the story, as opposed to a few curse words that were said by a few people demonstrating and protesting against the prison. And to me, that just reiterated that why we need an Emerald, and why we need independent journalism that isn't tied into this power structure, if you will, and it isn't looking to acquiesce to the will and demands of whether it be county officials or corporations. That instead we're accountable to the people, and I think that was again a glaring example of why you need, on the national level, things like Democracy Now!, and on the local level, things like the South Seattle Emerald.
Was Como actually there when that happened?
Thank you for bringing that up, Mike. No, they were not actually there. There were only two journalists or two media outlets that even bothered to show up. One was the South Seattle Emerald. I was there representing us, and then there's a reporter from KUOW who was there, and we were there from, I want to say 12:30 when an hour before the meeting started all the way until the meeting ended till 6 o'clock. So it was very interesting to see Como have this write-up and this coverage about what had actually transpired, at the council meeting when they arrived, 15 minutes after the actual skirmish, if you will, with the police and protesters. So it was very interesting that they could, sort of retroactively write this story about what happened when they weren't there to witness it themselves. So I lost a lot of, I didn't have much faith in our local media prior to that, but I lost the sliver of faith, I should say, that I had that day.
Yeah, the South End doesn't deserve to be underserved and misrepresented like this. I mean, with such amazing folks and stories that go on all the time, there's really no reason for it. And I encourage folks to check out the South Seattle Emerald and see if that lines up with things that they've been seeing already, or if it's a change, and if they like that change, keep reading.
Yes, and I would encourage people too to it just goes to show you that journalism needs now, I think at this point, needs to extend, past just quote unquote professional journalists. And I know there's a pejorative term sort of that equates with community journalists or with advocacy journalists, but I think those things are needed more than ever, in this day and age when you have media being a bottom line business like it's never been before, where again, somebody would rather go with a clickbait story or junk food news or get the low hanging fruit, quote unquote, of a story, as opposed to providing readers with a very nuanced, complex take on, issues that are extremely nuanced and complex. But that has become, unfortunately, seemingly a novel thing to do nowadays. And so I would hope that the Emerald can serve as an example of a truly community-based organization who encourages others to engage in community journalism, whether that, and we're not the only example. I mean, there's great hyperlocal blogs such as the West Seattle blog and the Capitol Hill Times as well. But I would hope that people could start to look at themselves as content creators of news, and whether it's one or two stories a year or what have you, or even if it's just helping to provide a more accurate portrayal of what goes on in their neighborhoods and in their lives, so that things like, again, the Como story can be called into question. It doesn't have to be taken as gospel.
And so members of the community should also consider giving tips and stories to outlets.
Yes, and
I know that's critical.
Yeah, I would say story tips and financial tips as well. I mean, if we need every tip we can get, but no, yeah, certainly they should encourage. I should say I certainly encourage people to write in with anything that they think needs to be covered in more depth or just hasn't been covered whatsoever. So.
Yeah, I mean, we're here for them. You know, we're here for the folks in the South End, whether they work there, play there, live there. You know, tell us what you want us to cover, because we're here to cover your stories. So,
Yeah.
absolutely, I agree.
Yeah, we call ourselves the people's paper, and you know, as hokey as that might sound, we want it to be accurate.
Well, I really like in the About tab about the South Seattle Emerald, the final sentence. The Emerald is news as it was originally intended to be, not as business nor as a forum for propaganda, but as a service to the community it chronicles.
Yes.
That moved me when I read that.
Well, we appreciate that, Mike. That was us at our most strident, I think. So,
We believe it. Yeah,
Definitely.
absolutely.
So do you have regular meetings where you discuss upcoming content, or?
We do. We meet every 2 months. Our board does, which, you know, Devin is the vice president of, so she's technically my boss. I don't have a vote on our board, and even though I founded, helped to found the organization, I wanted to make sure that mine wasn't the only voice that was ever being heard. I think that people have a tendency to sort of, when they're looked at as the voice for any area, are the voice of record. I think people have a tendency to sort of get a bit to allow hubris at times to sort of run wild, if you will. And so I wanted to make sure that didn't happen at the Emerald, and that you know, should I or any writer start to fall off the deep end there, that you had checks and balances to make sure that you know, there was no chicanery going on. We didn't want to be a Fox News or even MSNBC for that matter. We strive, again, to be fair and balanced. And obviously, yeah, we do have our own voice when it comes to news stories, but we want to make sure that voice is always something that is true and accurate as much as we can, you know, as much as that can possibly be.
All right, we've got just about a minute left. So how can people find out more about your publication and plug in?
Well, they can go, as has been mentioned before, to www.southseattleemerald, spelled out completely, .com. And then they can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at South Seattle Emerald. And then we will soon also be having a radio slot on a KBCS 91.3 FM. Can we say that? Is that a competing? I know it's a competing organization. And then we will also again soon be having our YouTube channel that's similar to what, if anybody's seen the Young Turks with Cenk Uygur, Our Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman. We'll soon be starting that up as well. So yeah.
We're on a path for unstoppable growth, and it all has to do with, you know, the folks that are kind of behind us and cheering us on and really excited about what we're doing. So the future is looking really bright.
Yeah. Devin's in marketing, if you didn't know. Yeah.
We're truly excited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say just one more thing that, like, even I would just encourage anybody, whether they're giving tips to the South Seattle Emerald or any other hyper-local blog, you know, please get out there. It's, you know, this world and this city, they need community journalists. They need people who can accurately depict what's going on, and, you know, question everything that comes in from any media source, whether it's the South Seattle Emerald or the Seattle Times. You know, ultimately, you know, truth is what should reign. And so, you know, every one of us should be truth tellers.
And happy Valentine's Day to the South End.
Yes, we do. Yes.
All right. Well, with that, we are unfortunately out of time. I want to thank you both for coming in and spending time with us this morning.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mike.